a great day, I'm feeling good. Oh, the possibilities of what I could.
What happens when a blind man, a woman of color, and a child of immigrants get together to discuss how diversity, inclusion, and equity affect your business?
I'm moving fast. Oh, I'm optimistic.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Choose Inclusion podcast. I'm UB, and I am the Latino white guy of the group.
I'm Nina. I am the woman of color in the group.
And I'm Mike. I'm the blind guy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Choose Inclusion. This is UB Simignetti, as always, and I'm here with Nina and Mike. Hello, team.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Top of the morning, or wherever you're listening.
Yeah, I want to know if they're listening to us on the space station. I'm going to ask that question at another time, but that would be kind of cool.
They should
We'll
be.
work on that. I know, that's what I was thinking. All right, well, welcome, and we're really excited. This is a very timely episode because of this is all about the PPP and the process and what's been happening in the last year to really help companies big and small, get through COVID, or at least be able to survive in some way. And so we've got a great guest who's really, for the last year, a lot of her time has been focused on bringing information and education to all of us to understand the PPP and how it's been working and not working, and the obstacles. So it's great to have Hannah Smolinski here. She's the founder and CEO of Clara CFO Group and a senior advisor to Upside Financial. And I'll let you kind of talk about those, Hannah. But welcome. How are you?
Hi, good morning. I'm doing really well. Just really excited to have this conversation today. So thank you so much for having me.
No, absolutely. We are too. It was great that you all reached out, particularly because the new rules for the PPP just rolled out. This February 22nd week of 2021. And so, first of all, tell us a little bit about you and how you came into this particular role.
Yeah, I'm like the what maybe the term is unexpected PPP expert now,
right,
exactly. It was
exactly.
never my intention to become an expert on these SBA loans, but here I am. So my background has always been in accounting. I'm a CPA. I worked for one of the largest firms in the world, and then left that job to go and work for a small business. Part of that small business world, I started to realize the need for just that financial understanding. Not everybody has somebody who has financial expertise to help them run their small business. So that ultimately evolved into me starting my own virtual CFO business, where now I serve small businesses, mostly making under $10 million in revenue in virtual CFO services. I like to almost call it like micro fractional, just the amount that they need, but so where they don't have to keep a high paid person on their payroll, right? So I started this business, but then what I was realizing is this year my clients were starting to, have the effects of the pandemic. And then I heard about the Paycheck Protection Program. That's what we're going to call PPP, maybe for anybody who hasn't heard about the program. But with that, I started to realize, well, wow, not everybody has like a virtual CFO on their team, right? So who's telling people about this if it's just a sole proprietor running their business, or maybe just a couple people together doing the service of whatever they started their small business with? They might not have a financial professional on their side and nobody that's got their back. So I kind of started to put my information up on YouTube just to try to hopefully share it with my community as I was having webinars with my clients and trying to, get the education out. And from there, I've had some significant growth in my YouTube channel as I've just been growing that piece and trying to answer people's questions. Basically, every video is just coming out now as an answer to a question. So trying to stay on top of guidance as best as I can. And kind of with that, I've become a sort of, unexpected expert, I guess.
So, Hannah, I was wondering if we could jump into kind of what was the rollout of PPP like last year, how that impacted businesses, especially businesses that are led by underrepresented groups, and what's changing this year?
Sure. So when the CARES Act first came out, and that's the act that sort of created the Paycheck Protection Program and put it into place, that it was a very quick timeline from when that act happened and when they said that it would should open this program, and they allotted funds for this program, but it was on a first come, first served basis. So, what happened is right at the very beginning, these banks were scrambling to sort of implement these guidelines, right? Get all these new applications in with like very specific requests on how to get loans. And so the banks were scrambling to try to get up and running to receive these applications. Borrowers were panicking, trying to figure out what was going on. And what happened is basically the very top businesses, the ones that had finance on their teams, the ones that had somebody watching out for them, they were the first people to get applications in. Because there are even now, still almost a year later, businesses that are just finding out and understanding about the Paycheck Protection Program. So the ones that were getting in right at the very beginning, they were kind of they were probably already at an advantage because they probably already had existing banking relationships, or they had financial professionals on their team that were kind of keeping their ear to the ground on this. So that's kind of the environment at that very beginning. It was super panic. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys like applied at that very beginning, but it was panic all around. People were scrambling at calling banks left and right, trying to get into the program. And some of them were being turned away as well.
Hannah, this is Mike Hess, and yes, we're a small nonprofit. Uh, and we had been using a fractional CFO here locally in the Denver metro area for a couple of years.
Mhm.
So we were absolutely part of that group where it's saying yes, we had an advantage. Now strategically, I recognize like that wasn't my bailiwick, so it made absolute sense to go the fractional CFO. Like your model, I think is brilliant. I think more small businesses need to realize like it is the best investment you're ever going to make is to bring in somebody like you. So I'm one of your biggest cheerleaders, but I know that so with small businesses not having that representation, but also how many small businesses are, let's say, filled with underrepresented, communities. Like we know the percentages of Black women who start their own businesses, minorities in general, women in general. So these marginalized communities. So from your lens, like what can you give us some of just your numbers of like how many folks that you might be helping that are from these? Again, I'm not even going to ask you. So how many blind entrepreneurs did you help? Because I know the numbers there, but from your vantage point, how many people were coming from these underrepresented communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see when we look at the entrepreneur landscape is it's extremely diverse. But the majority, like I can look at my demographics on YouTube and see who is watching just male and female, or I can't obviously see certain demographics, but I was definitely getting a lot of questions coming from all over the place. But a lot of my clients were um, white business owners. I mean, I'm basically, but I was starting to see a few people starting to understand and get access to this, like as time went on. So, starting to see more small business owners kind of from underrepresented communities as time went on. But immediately, I had clients that are women, but they probably wouldn't have known about it had I not been kind of on their team. And so it's hard to say because I don't have hard demographics on it, but I could just see like as time went on, more people got to know about it, and the smaller business owners, especially because I think what we see a lot of times is women typically their businesses tend to be smaller in general, and I think that's a statistic like backed up in fact. So we have fewer employees typically, which means they probably don't have as many people on their team to help with this. So we were seeing a lag in women business owners. And I mean, my demographics show it too. Like I'm 66% men and 33% women, just from, who's watching my YouTube channel. So that just kind of gives me an indicator. Yes, that's people who watch YouTube, but it's also like business owners. I have more just male business owners than female business owners, right? But we're definitely starting to see that yes, people are asking questions, but sometimes like I'm a year in now and some people are just saying, hey, am I eligible? And I'm noticing some of those are minority business owners. So I do think it's a level of access that we're definitely talking about here.
Yeah, but I mean, what's also interesting is that, one of the stats you sent us prior to the podcast, was that only 12% of Black and Brown small business owners receive the assistance that they asked for.
Right.
So the ones who are even asking are getting a much lower rate of approval.
Yeah, that was
everyone else. And so it kind of like, it kind of like puts to question. It's like, well, why even bother?
Yeah.
Like the system's not built for them.
Yeah. And I think that was a shocking statistic for me because I thought it was more about people just not knowing and not asking. So I was really shocked to see that number, and I was wanting to dive into that a little bit more. And I was thinking about that in practicality because I've worked with some business owners that I thought, hey, this would be a great program for them. But when we really got into the details of looking at their numbers, it was, for example, sole proprietors, the way that sole proprietors loan amounts were being calculated was based on net profit. And if you have a business that, maybe was in an investment year or they had just started their business, they probably have a pretty low net profit. So then when you really get into calculating the loan at the end of the day, it was going to be a tiny, tiny number. So I wonder if maybe like that was part of it. But we also had a lot of people going and trying to apply and being kind of pushed away because they didn't have an existing banking relationship. So I think both of those things are probably coming into play there. And then I would say the third, um, I'm trying to think about the other things that I think are contributing factors to that. I mean, it could just be people turning them away and saying, sorry, no, you're not a client. I'm not going to help you. And, I don't fully know about the practicality of that.
Yeah, like
Well,
we've had multiple conversations with people about just like the high level of distrust that the financial industry and as a whole has built with the Black community here, for hundreds of years. They haven't built a reason for trust. And it seems like, 2020 wasn't very different in terms of continuing to make any efforts to build that trust. They just reinforced everything that the Black community knows, which is that financial institutions and the government aren't really out there to help them in the same way that they're willing to help white people. But I mean, it sounds like the Biden administration is trying to at least and put some new policies in place to reach these minority-owned, small businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the trust thing too, because I think that is I was hearing that a lot at the very beginning, even people who got loans, just turning them back and giving them back in because they just weren't confident in the forgiveness steps. They felt like it was not clear. And they were like, well, even if I get this money, who knows if they're actually going to give forgiveness to me? And they gave money back, so that was definitely a big point. The Biden administration just this week, and that's what we were kind of alluding to at the beginning of the podcast, was they have put in place a couple measures that I think are super helpful for especially these smallest of business owners, which covers the majority of. I mean, we've got 30 million small business owners in the U.S., and most of them are under, like either have less than 20 employees. And then even in that category, even more of them are just sole proprietors with no employees. So that's really who's being targeted in this kind of sort of next round of focus with some guidelines. So the Biden administration has first said for the next 14 days, starting, so we're recording this on a Friday, so starting this past Wednesday, for 14 days, the bank should only prioritize loans for businesses with less than 20 employees. So this program right now, the second round of PPP is for businesses with up to 300 employees. So, and then the original Paycheck Protection Program was under 500. So we're talking about really large businesses. I mean, they're quote unquote small businesses in the eyes of the SBA, but they are still very large businesses when we're talking about the majority of businesses in the US. So the Biden administration said, hey, we're going to put kind of a moratorium on all those larger businesses applying. Let's focus on getting money to these smaller businesses. The average loan size is somewhere around like $75,000, $73,000, which is, really going to help those smaller businesses. So they're focusing on that first. But the bigger issue, I think, and the issue that sort of helps more, I think this is where it's really going to help minority business owners, is the change in the calculation of the loan amount for sole proprietors. So like I had mentioned earlier, the sole proprietors were allowed to take their net income and calculate the loan based on the net income. So that's after all the expenses in the business. But now they're saying, no, we're going to change it so you can calculate it based on your gross income. So that's your gross receipts before taking out any expenses. And that can be a significant number difference between, potentially somebody not even wanting to bother with a PPP loan, and then somebody who could, get some significant money to help them kind of get through this trying time.
I mean, this is I'm gonna get this episode out as soon as we're done recording. Just because I think it's
Right.
just so critical to your point, but it kind of begs the question to kind of tie it all back into a lot of what we talk about here on Choose Inclusion. It begs the question, right? Was it just all chaos, or was chaos just used to cover up what's
Mm.
really happening, right? Like what this, as it relates to the disparity and who's getting what number, right? Like and I think we know the answer, but
I know
it,
it's so frustrating. Like what happened last year, like Ruth's Chris
yeah,
Steakhouse was given $20 million for the
Right.
PPP
right,
program. Like Shake Shack received the money. They both ended up returning it just because they're like publicly well-known companies. But apparently like 200 companies that are publicly traded
Right.
received $750 million in loan bailouts.
yeah.
And like that's just ridiculous. Like how can this program that's designed for small businesses do that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it was a matter of like, hey, the rules say if we have less than this many employees, and oh yeah, now, together with all my affiliates, that it starts to, I mean, a lot of fast food chains got this money too. This was not just the big guys. I mean, this was across the board. And I mean, I think it also, the bar wasn't high enough to test some of those. And I don't think they were thinking through, and maybe they were, I don't know, maybe they were, but they did not properly vet the need for this money. And I think that's been one of the challenges of the program, with both the speed at which it was trying to get out. I appreciate the speed, like I'm like, I understand the need to get this money out to the community as soon as possible. However, with that, they didn't properly vet the financial need for the money. And with later on, they put in the guidelines of like, if you like, I mean, for example, Shake Shack gave back their money. They had a round of funding that was like $178 million, like days after they got their PPP loan. So like, everybody thought they were heroes for giving back the money, but really they were just fine. They
Yeah,
didn't need the money.
right.
And
Well,
then
go
yeah,
ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead. Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, they later on they allowed people to give the money back if, they thought they couldn't really say that the money was, needed for the future of their business. But there were tons of organizations still that got loans. And I even talked to a sports reporter back in, I think it was I can't remember when I talked to them, but there was a hockey team, a professional hockey team that got a large loan, and they weren't even intending to use it for paychecks. Like they were just going to use it for rent. And they said, well, we're just going to pay back the loan. And they essentially got a really sweet 1% business loan out of the program, and
Right.
it was like, no, but there was still money left in the program. They applied at the very end, and there was still money left on the table, and small business owners weren't taking it. So they were like, well, we're smart people. We're going to go, we're going to
Well,
go and get this 1% loan.
at the end of the day, like that's where it's just like anything else, right? And to your point about not doing the homework, like at the end of the day, what happens is when you don't do your homework, or when you don't really define the rules, then bias takes over,
Mhm.
right? And you just kind of default to, well, we're just gonna go with what's comfortable. And I
Mhm.
think sadly, that's how a lot of things get, and so I guess, one of the cool things we were talking about before is, there are a lot of local kind of community driven organizations, financial organizations, banks, CPAs, who do have this kind of inclusive mindset. And I mean, it sucks because as a business owner, a small business owner, you kind of have to seek them out. But there are people out there, I guess, is the good news. Wouldn't you say that there are organizations out there who are really trying to help everybody?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I I do have hope that I think that there are organizations that are trying to make this as accessible and open as possible. Um, I really do think that some of this goes into the mindset of sort of like those who always have had will continue to get. And then those who maybe haven't or don't think that they're eligible will kind of opt out, or maybe they don't think it's for them, so maybe they just won't. I am seeing this where also business owners who potentially might this mindset of like they could really use the money, but they're almost kind of talking themselves out of the money because they're like, well, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm used to struggle. So I'm going to continue to kind of struggle through this because that's who I am. Like I've struggled enough. I know that I don't usually get this stuff. So I'm going to kind of opt like I don't need it, which I actually had a conversation with a Latino woman like a couple weeks ago, and I was telling her that she was eligible for the second round of PPP. And I was like, well, like this money is for you. I was trying to like convince her that the money was for her. And she almost felt bad about taking a second round of money. And I just think about like all those huge businesses that are happy to receive a second round of money when they can probably make money in lots of other different ways. And yet this woman who, is probably just trying to like support her family with this money was kind of opting herself out. And I don't know, that kind of broke my heart in some ways because I was like, well, this is exactly who this money is for. It's not necessarily for the business that is doing just fine, and making, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because again, as a blind entrepreneur, knowing I'm really in a minority. When the pandemic was first happening, again, we were 7 years old at the time as an organization, and we were doing okay. But our business model is we act as a nonprofit staffing agency, and we help organizations with their equity inclusion initiatives around professionals with disabilities. So a lot of our revenue came from placements, right? Getting very amazing talented people from the people with disabilities community placed in these organizations. And immediately I thought to myself, I'm like, well, the first round of layoffs are going to affect those people who are doing like those staff aug kind of opportunities. And so it's not that my mindset was glass half empty as much as I was just like, I had to ask myself, is this pandemic going to be the end of my dream? Because again, there are so few professionals with disabilities in the in the business and the executive leadership, like anywhere, legislation, so for me, not ever knowing that representation out there, like my mindset, absolutely, again, I wasn't going glass half empty, but I was giving myself a reality check about a year ago to this date. So to support that story that you have, I appreciate what that young lady was saying.
Yeah. Well, and it's like when you look at the language, right? Like even comparing, I was just looking at particularly the point about expanding eligibility to non-citizen small business owners who are lawful US residents, right? Like that simple sentence was different a year ago. So it's no wonder, right, that there are millions upon millions of underrepresented people in this country who, yeah, you at some point the struggle and the oppression is just too much. You have to rely on yourself, and you can't, even because everything else, it never says it supports you in any way, shape, or form. And that, I mean, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. Like that's so hard.
Yeah, I was actually thinking like today. So I saw. I'm pretty. I don't know if I'm super active on Twitter, but I was watching Twitter, and honestly, like a lot, I have a feeling a lot of like financial information on like how to manage your finances, because it's not anything that people teach you in school. It's really hard to learn about like how to start your own business. But someone just put it into 180 characters or less, how to turn $150 into $5,000, spend $150, get an LLC, get a loan for $5,000, with the small business grants that are coming out. And now you've turned 150 into 5,000. Obviously, that's a gross oversimplification, but like even a small amount of thing like that is the kind of access to information that people don't even know that that's even a possibility.
I think that this idea that the money is there for you is a little bit of the mountain, and I think that's probably part of the history that we have to kind of face and say, yes, underrepresented communities typically have not had access to funding and they're not used to government programs like this being for them that are supporting their businesses. And I think that has been part of it, of people just assuming maybe that it's not for them, even if they have heard about it, which is also like just a level of like, we we don't know what we don't know. And so that's part of like why I wanted to do YouTube, because I was like, I can get the most information out there as possible to people to let them know, like, this is for them. This is a program that is accessible if you just do like a little bit of work to figure out whether or not you are. Um, and but I think that's the thing. It's like we can try to get the information out there as much as we can. But I still do think that there is a level of disconnect between people who want to get the money and then the people who are actually getting the money. And I think that's what we see with that statistic of, you know, Black and brown business owners that went to go and get money were not actually getting it at the end of the day at the levels that they were requesting it. And yeah, still a fundamental problem there for sure.
Well, we could probably talk about this forever, but the good news is, and we'll put a link, if you could send us a link, we'll put a link to your YouTube channel um, to share. But thank you for this, this overview. I think, it's important. There's some really cool programs happening here in Colorado to help kind of small businesses really understand their access and their eligibility and all that, and even different ways of getting access to different kinds of money. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the education, how it's presented. And so thank you for the work that you're doing, Hannah. And really excited that we got a chance to speak with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you guys, your insight and kind of bringing a different perspective too. And thank you for the work that you're doing with inclusion.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks.
And thank you all, Choose Inclusion audience, for continuing to tune in. As always, chooseinclusion.com is kind of the central hub, and you can get to all different kinds of streaming sites from there. So check it out. And thank you all for listening. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Choose Inclusion podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can see closed captioning for this podcast on our YouTube channel. You can find us online on our website, chooseinclusion.com, and contact us on Twitter @chooseinclusion.